Each religion has its unique explanation for major questions concerning human existence. Among these questions, the most inevitable is, who am I? There are as many answers to this as there are religions, and many will answer this question with different beliefs. For example, in Western religion, a popular belief is that humans are living vessels consisting of a soul containing individual personalities. What distinguishes Buddhism from these religions is its detail on human psychology and science, explaining these questions. More specifically, Buddha broke his idea down into a process of stages he believed human consciousness went through. These stages support Buddha's theory, which is what most people call a soul or a spirit, is really a manifestation of causation involving human senses and applying them into conscious observation. The foundation of Buddha's insights come from his Four Noble Truths, which are elaborated in the famous Heart Sutra, which not only consists of the senses in a human, called the five aggregates of causation known as skandhas in Sanskrit, but also explains the 12-fold stages of causation known as dependent origination. Buddha gave these five aggregates in a lecture shortly after his enlightenment. Skanda literally translates to heap, or what we may recognize today as baggage. Unlike a soul, the five aggregates are what Buddha believes to be what humans did have. Many who are used to the concept of a soul would perhaps be disappointed, thinking the senses are only what humans have, finding this to be an empty explanation of the human being. In fact, the emptiness of the five aggregates is mentioned in ancient texts, which will be addressed later. Is the main teaching of Buddha to feel emptiness in life and how it isn't of high value? Even if this is the case, phenomena isn't fully explained in the teaching of the five aggregates and how they operate through dependent origination, the second piece of the puzzle. Before I walk through the stages of dependent origination, I will address the five aggregates that partake in the Buddhist idea of consciousness. Introduced in the first of the Four Noble Truths, the five aggregates are simply the mental and physical features of the human in sync with each other. Together, they are the core existence of a person. In Buddha's second sermon, the Analekana Sutta, he elaborates these features. These features are also mentioned in the Heart Sutra. How does this relate to the aggregates? The English translations of defining these features are ambiguous, but share the same idea. The first skanda is form. Form consists of five physical organs and the senses attached with them. The five physical organs are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body. The senses for these organs are quite simple. The eye is the physical organ that has the sense of sight. The ear is the physical organ that has the sense of sound. The nose is the organ that has the sense of smelling. The sense of taste is contingent upon the tongue, and lastly, the whole of the body has the sense with tangible objects. When many think of religion, it can involve mysticism, and one may expect these organs and senses to be applied in some sort of phenomena, but it doesn't go beyond the ordinary assumption. People watch television with eyes, people listen to music with ears, people taste ice cream with the tongue, and athletes dribble basketballs with their bodies. The second skanda is feelings or sensations. There are three different kinds of sensations or feeling: pleasant, unpleasant, and indifferent. Again, I stress that this isn't meant to be elaborated beyond its physical definition. When one eats ice cream with the tongue organ, he or she will feel pleasant. When one gets a cut by a tangible object affecting the body's organ senses, he or she will feel unpleasant. Between these two feelings is indifference, when you don't feel pleasant nor unpleasant. The third skanda is perception and conceptual thought. This is the skanda that conceptualizes an experience. For example, if one is walking down the street and trips over an object, he or she will perceive it as tripping over a skateboard. The fourth skanda is mental formations. This is the feature that creates whatever parts of individuality there is in a person, the counter-element of the soul. Mental formation is simply one's response to perception. In other words, interacting with objects and conditions is what creates the Buddhist idea of individuality. Intention plays a role, but this is where a person's morals lie. Let's use the scenario from the last example. If a person is walking down the street, trips over a skateboard, sees that it belongs to a teenager next to it, the agent will react by yelling at the teenager, or could politely tell him to be careful. Any reaction would define the person's individuality. In Buddhist nature, which is the ideal way of acting in Buddhism, one would react in a non-harming manner. Lastly, the fifth skanda is consciousness. Consciousness is merely the presence and awareness of form or sensitivity to an object. Broken down in an elaborate specificity, mind consciousness is otherwise known as the sixth sense. This is not a physical feature, but it's the part of the mind that recognizes and discriminates the three types of consciousnesses in a human. Physical cognition is what recognizes objects or conditions because of a past experience. The second one is comparative cognition. This is the part of the consciousness that recognizes objects in the mind without seeing them and comparing past experiences with logic. For instance, if we all think of something that we know has harmed us or others from past experiences, we will hesitate to engage in it now because we know better. The third one is non-cognition. Like comparative cognition, it can sometimes be an absence of physical objects or conditions. The difference is non-cognition can create false cognition with some irrelevant experience and comparison. In other words, it's thinking without rationalization. If I wanted to skip a class, I would create reasons to get out of going. Skipping that class before may not have harmed me, so it won't harm me this time. In Buddhist literature, there is a conversation between two characters, Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara. Shariputra is said to have had precise scientific knowledge, possibly advocating organs in the form aggregate. This Avalokiteshvara represents compassion and skillful means in Buddhist practice. Avalokiteshvara points out to Shariputra, form is empty, emptiness is form. Form is no other than emptiness, and emptiness is no other than form. The line form is empty picks out the first aggregate, saying that form is interdependent, making form itself empty. This is true in the matter that a tongue, for example, doesn't interact with the sense of tasting unless there is ice cream involved. The Heart Sutra makes many references to this lesson, one being, Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Some Buddhist schools interpret this text as the aggregates supporting nihilism, while others see emptiness as a lack of intrinsic value. The end of the first noble truth supports the aggregates lacking intrinsic value when Buddha says, the five aggregates which are grasped at are suffering. If the five aggregates are what Buddhists believe to be the features of a human but aren't meant to be grasped at because it lacks a core, one may wonder how the aggregates are applied in day-to-day life and how one can avoid suffering. According to the Buddhist teachings, simply being aware of the aggregates supposedly enriches life, and how this affects happiness when they are inevitably applied in the 12-fold chain of causations. The Four Noble Truths are said to be driven by causality, or the 12 conditions. The five aggregates are like parts of a car, in sync, but the car doesn't fully operate unless it's running. When the car is running, it goes through a series of 12 causations that link the beginning of consciousness, being ignorant, and ending in a person's non-consciousness, being ignorant once again. Dependent origination is the process of a person's events and experiences reflecting on the five aggregates. It forms the foundation for Buddha's teaching on emptiness core teaching of the Heart Sutra, supporting the idea that the human has no core, and the self is the feature of the human with these experiences. The chain is being aware solely on the chain that causes suffering. Suffering was Buddha's major concern. Dependent origination is also said to be the concern of samsara, the endless chain of suffering caused by birth and death. The first condition is ignorance, which we will all experience at our birth or early years of life. Ignorance is the opposite of knowledge. Sometimes people are ignorant, or they pretend to be ignorant in order to avoid the truth. If someone is sick, he or she must first know what disease he or she has. The second stage is formation, which has also been defined as volitional action. This is the energy that arises from our ignorance. This energy can be a result of failing to see the truth or simply ignoring it. This action equates to karma, bringing certain results. If I was making unhealthy decisions, I may get a cold. The cold may be my karmic energy. The third stage is consciousness and cognition, not to be confused with the mind consciousness aggregate. This is the ego that brings the illusionary and individual existence. This can also be seen as the person or self being a result of the karmic formation from the ignorant action or non-action. The fourth stage is name and form, also known as mentality and physicality. This is simply when one sees and identifies an object or a person. It's the way we perceive things. It's that designation we need to make in a day-to-day life in order to communicate with others. This may be the stage after consciousness and cognition because it's a result of identifying people by their individuality or ego. The fifth stage is the sixth sense basis, otherwise known as the sense sources. This is the basis of mental activity. The six sense organs are essentially the same as the five physical organs and senses of the form aggregate, but this stage is the physical senses of the organ actually playing parts of the consciousness. The first five should come familiar: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. The sixth sense is the thinking mind, which will be explained later. In order for these to fully function, you need the sense organ, which you need a consciousness of the organ to receive its sensitive information. Remember the ice cream example. Then you need a consciousness of the organ to receive its sensitive information, the taste of the ice cream, and of course the object, the ice cream you are sensing, interacts with. The sixth stage is contact. The thinking mind, as mentioned, is considered a sense organ because it senses incoming information from exterior organs. Senses are like doors for external objects to enter the mind, like a loudspeaker, the object, entering the mind through the sensitive ears. Next, the seventh stage is feeling. This ties especially close to contact, and people have a hard time distinguishing the two. Our feelings tend to arise when we see, hear, smell, taste, or make contact with the body. Perhaps we feel something when we listen to music. Feeling can be dangerous because it arises when the object changes. If the band you are listening to sounds good changes their musical direction, it can drive those good feelings to turn bad. Therefore, objects can determine our feelings. Phase 8 is craving, also known as attachment. Hearing, smelling, tasting, or contacting can give us attachment to our experience